Good evening. So, today's topic of discussion will be motion and measurement of substances. Why do you think we need to learn this? What is motion and what are measurements? Is there any relevance of studying motion and measurements in daily life? This question shall be answered in succeeding slides. Let's move on. Story of transport. How transport began. Let us understand that. There's one interesting storybook which I have made. So let us flip through the pages of how exactly story of transport started. Very long back ago, how people used to travel. They used to travel by the foot, by walking and carrying their carriages, carrying their stuffs behind their backs like this. And it was very tedious work, to be very honest. And as the time passed, what happened is there was a change, but change was observed. That is, movement or transport using animals. Horse riding, donkey riding, all these were used for traveling from one point to another point. Okay? Further, how the story propels. Thora or time. After few years, you can see the transport was also done via water bodies. To, to successfully travel via water body, what one can do? The humans started preparing boats. They used to collect wooden pieces, wooden shafts, and try to assemble in such a way that they can travel through water bodies. The important invention that happened was invention of wheel. It totally changed the way how transport was from ancient times. If you trace back from ancient time to till the time we reach of invention of wheel, you can clearly see that how tedious the transport was. Now, what happened? What story changes can you observe after the invention of wheel? That we will see now. Wheel until 19th century, as I said, the transport was very tedious. But the invention of wheel was something that was a total game changer. Wheel made the transport very much efficient. Until 19th century, bullock carts and all such carriages were used for mode of transport. What happened after 19th century? The perspective changed. The way we look at things changed. That is, we started using energy resources for transportation. The steam engine was a total game changer here. The use of energy for transportation started to begin until 19th century. Further development of automobile industries, such as development of different modes of vehicles, such as vans, taxis, cars, buses, and ambulances, and even there was change in how transport happened in water bodies. You can see the motorboats here. Use of energy became more prominent in further times as the time propelled further. Next, around early 1900s, aeroplanes came into existence. All the transport materials and traveling used to happen via aerial mode. In 20th century, there were several contributions as one can see. One can visibly address the changes and the development that happened from the ancient time till the current time. You can see the electric vehicles and use of different sources of energy for transport. If you want to see the spacecraft, you can see the launch of rockets and all that by using different sources of energy. So one can observe a visible shift from basically simple to much more complex situations here. So this was the story of how the transportation happened. I hope this much is clear. Now, this is all. This was all about story of transport. How exactly transport started, how exactly you can see the changes from one point to another point. You can see the transformation that happened from one particular stage to another stage. Next, what will you do to measure certain things? What was the ancient methods which were used to measure things? For example, just keep this in mind for some time that there exists no standard method of measurement. So how will you measure something? That is, the ancient methods how one can measure certain things. For example, a boy tried to measure the desk, length of the desk, using the gilli danda which he used. He kept gilli danda along the length of across the length of the desk, and then he started to measure it. Measurement A was noted. Again, what happened was he lost his gilli danda. So he bought another gilli danda, and again he measured the length across the desk. So the measurement came along was B, we can say B centimeters. What prominent difference you can see? The difference is the size of gilli danda is not standard here. And second thing, he got different measurements by using same, the gilli danda was gilli danda, but the thing is the size of gilli danda was different. Because the size of gilli danda was different, the measurements across the length of the desk came differently. So the length were for first one was A centimeters and second one was B centimeters. So this was the reason. So because there was no standardization as such, he got two different values for the same desks. So how such problems can be tackled? At ancient times, what they did was they used to measure the length with use of strings. धागे का प्रयोग करते थे. He used to measure the length of desk via strings. How this can be done, we will be discussing it in further slides. Ancient system of measurements was quite unique and was very innovative, we can say. As you can see, from the cheek length to the tip of the finger, it was called as yard. The hand measurements was also used, the foot measurements were also used, and the whole arm full arms measurement, we can call it as cubit, and from thumb to pinky finger, that distance we call it as span. That distance we call it as span. And from one thumb distance is an inch. And when we close one full fist, we measure it as palm distance. We measure it as a palm distance. These were the methods through which they used to measure it. But this method of measurements had several drawbacks. What are the drawbacks that we will be addressing further? See, why there is a need of standard measurements? Because you can see the arm length could be differing for different individuals. If it is one arm length for person A, it might be two arm length for person B. This is an hypothetical statement, but yet it could help you to make sense. So, since the arm length is not similar for every individual, so this method was not a very apt method for measurement. Still, this measurement is a way of measuring things for one's understanding and to show one's perspective, but still, this is not a very efficient way of measurement as it can vary from individual to individual. So, for sorting such problems, sorting this issue, what came further? Standard units of measurements. It came around 1790. The French created standard unit of measurement and they named it as metric system. If 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 an entity is standardized, it will, if you measure anything in any part of the world, it will be seen and it could be interpreted and reproduced in any part of the world. This was the main motto of making metric system. For example, if we want to understand what is metric system, let us understand the units which are under metric system. That is, for example, meter. 1 meter is divided into 100 equal divisions, that we call it as centimeters. That means if I say if I am traveling 1 meter, that means I have traveled hundreds of centimeters. 1 centimeter, if you take just 1 centimeter, then it would be around 10 divisions of millimeter. 10 equal divisions, that is, we call it as millimeter. For measuring larger distance, if you want to measure more vast distances, like for example traveling distances, you can go for length, you can go for kilometer. For measuring larger distances, meter is not a convenient unit, as you have to elaborate the meter. So what can be done? We can define a larger unit of length by using another unit that is called as kilometer. So if we say in terms of kilometers, that is 1 kilometer, if we say, it means it corresponds to 1000 meter. It corresponds to 1000 meter. While communicating, we don't say that I have traveled 1000 meters. It would be very convenient if we said it in kilometers. This is the main idea. Keeping it very simple. Keeping it very simple is the idea here. Next, what is the correct measurement of the length? See, we did talk about how we measured it in ancient times, how to measure using strings. Now, how exactly we can measure, that we have to understand. We did understand what are units, what are meters, centimeters, and kilometers. Now, how correctly we can measure the length if we are given a box? For example, if we are using a scale here, so if the zero line is not proper, then you can always go for from 1. But you have to minus out this divisions if you want to get the proper length of the box. For example, if you have a proper scale, you can keep from first marking, that is 0, to if it is coming from 13, that is it is 13 centimeters. 13 centimeters. Now, in second case, you have to keep it in a very horizontal way. Horizontal way. If you keep it crisscross, you can see, if you keep it in point to point, you can see the variations here. You can see it. That is, it's coming around 13.5. It's coming 13.3 if you keep it just horizontally. If you keep it just tilted, and if you go point to point, it's coming 13.5. So next, when you see, if 0 is not properly visible, you can just keep it from 1. Just cancel out the divisions prior to it. So these are some methods through which we can measure certain dimensions of any objects. Next, measuring the length of a curved line. See, for measuring curved line, as I mentioned earlier, we can use thread. Measuring via thread is very efficient method to measure any curved line. So what can be done is, we can take a thread. From starting point, we can just put a knot at point A. I can just place the thread along the curve, and where the curve ends, we can put another knot and mark it as point B. Once we have placed the thread throughout the curved line, we can just take the thread and put it in front of a scale for measuring actual length of the curved line. So this method is very efficient for measuring any curved lines or any curved objects. Okay. Now, moving things around us. So if you want to measure the distance of moving objects, so this method will be very efficient. This is thread measuring method only, but this is kind of a mini experiment which one can discuss about. Take a white paper, place few crystals of sugar. Wait for some time, you can observe ants moving around. Select a particular ant. If ant approaches the sugar cube or sugar crystals, starts to eat it, and just put one point or one dot across it. Wait for some time. Allow the ant to move freely to different positions. As the ant moves from position A to position B, put one more point over there. Position B to position C, one more markings over there. Position C to position D, put one more markings over there. And now, once all the four markings are done, just clear off the paper. Clear off the paper. Then join the points using a pencil. Once the points are joined, you can use this thread method again to measure the distance and figure out how much distance the ant traveled around. This method you can use to measure moving things, measure for the things which are moving. Okay, next. Now, since we did talk about measurements and motions, we also need to understand how many types of motions are there, and we will be learning each motions with one examples. Let us go. Types of motions are circular motions, rectilinear motions, and periodic motions. These three types of motions we will be learning exclusively. First is circular motions. What is circular motion? Movement of any object in circular path. We can say, for example, rotating of fan. In circular motion, two types of motions can be seen. Two types of forces can be seen. That is centripetal and centrifugal force. Centripetal force means what? Moving from interior to external, from inside to outside, pushing it outside. And centripetal force and centrifugal force. Centrifugal means pushing it from inside to outside, and centripetal keeps the object its center position. This basically aids in circular motion. The circular motion classic examples are turbines, motors, rotating fans, spinning tops, and spinning wheel. You can see the rotation and revolution both happening simultaneously. So these are some examples of circular motion. What is rectilinear motion? As you can observe, in one direction, moving in one direction, you can see armies marching towards one position, movement of vehicles in a highway. This moves along a similar path. That we call it as rectilinear motion. Now, linearity means what? Moving in a straight line. That is linear motion. Now, next is periodic motion. See, when the same motion repeats itself, if you see the patterns which gets repeated after equal intervals of time, we can call it as periodic motion. For example, if you observe pendulum moves to and fro position A to position B. It moves. You can observe it. And when the pendulum moves, it moves from point A to point B, that is to and fro. So this type of motion, we call it as periodic motion. It reaches to point A from point B and again to point A after certain period of time. It repeats. You can observe a pattern here. Similar in case of hands of wall clock. And also you can take into consideration Earth's revolution around sun. So these are some examples of periodic motion. So these were some of the types of motions which we discussed. Further, we will be learning a lot more things in our channel. Thank you so much for listening patiently. I hope everyone understood each and every concepts which have been discussed. These are some of the references and some of the images I have took from internet. These are used exclusively for educational purposes. I hope the source holders are very much kind enough to let go of these things. And thank you everyone for listening. This is your host, Ms. Pillai, signing off. Take care.